Well, it's nice to have you, Charlie.
Thank you.
So, how are you enjoying yourself so far this evening?
It's actually pretty cool. I like the setup outside. Food was good, ambiance was good, and the energy was good. So
did startup grind wow you?
It did a little bit actually.
Wow factor?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it.
That's awesome. That's what we do here at Startup Grind. Wow you.
That's cool. I've been a Bitwise before, many times, and usually there's no one in the hallway, but now there's these giant signs with giant letters, and it's kind of cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's get right into it. So tell us, who is Charlie Harris? Tell us a little bit more about yourself and the important roles you play within our community, Charlie.
For sure. Well, I'm still trying to figure that one out, but I grew up in Fresno. I was born here, Fresno Community Hospital, and went to Sunnyside High School. I don't know if there's anyone here. No? One person? Cool. 06 graduate. And I went to UC Santa Barbara, studied architecture and the environment, and got my certification in green building and sustainable design. But if I backtrack a little bit, I really wasn't that involved in green sustainability stuff around the mid-2000s. It just wasn't on my radar. I was playing sports and I was interested in psychology. And then I took a class at UC Santa Barbara on green architecture. It was an elective. And I was like, why aren't we doing this with every building? Why aren't we going around and having every facility, every home built in a way that's more responsible and more eco-friendly? And so that really, got my passion going, and I decided to change my major from psychology to green architecture. So
talk about pivoting, huh?
It was a big pivot. Yeah. I went from left brain to right brain, but actually, I feel like that's more me. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So we all know that sustainability is a really broad term. So can you define it to your understanding and what led you to be, so passionate about it?
Yeah, you can use the term for pretty much anything. Sustainability can cover so many industry aspects. I think where it really hit me was when I learned about climate change and also how we live and how we consume things, and I started to realize my own impact and how I ate, how I wasted things, and it just kind of came slowly. It wasn't right away an epiphany. There were so many people that I met that were, mentors, but also just other people that were interested in the same things, and so they helped build my energy to move forward in this direction. And so I developed the passion while I was in college, and then out of college, it really just started to build. And then I realized I wanted to make my career into something that was focused on sustainability. I always had a passion for nature and the built environment, so I started architecture and the environment, and I actually wanted to be a golf course designer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I played sports, and I played golf, played other sports too, but I was really interested in turning golf courses into more eco-friendly habitats, because golf courses actually are great habitats for animals. If you go out there, you'll see there's a lot of trees and shrubs where there's some amazing wildlife out there, but they also use pesticides and herbicides, and it's more manicured to the liking of the humans there. So that's why I wanted to get into that. I wanted to create something a little bit more natural, but still fun for us to.
So that gives you more perspective on, nature and the things that you can do. And, I could relate too with the nature aspect, because, when you're out in nature, to me, when I'm out in nature, I'm meditating and I'm seeing other things that sometimes you don't really realize till you're out there. And it's interesting how nature and it all comes together with the sustainability movement.
Yeah, definitely. We're on this planet together, and it's not just humans, it's other things, and we rely on the other things on this planet to keep a beautiful ecosystem for us to thrive on. So it just kind of hit me over a few years that we're sharing this, and we should do it in an efficient way, and just like your own home. You don't want to just ruin your home because you decide to consume and waste and throw things around. You don't do that. It's just not a natural thing. Maybe for some people, but it just felt right to go into this field.
So we have learned that you have your business, Life Flower LLC. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was actually just out of college, and my cousin, who's actually my business partner now, he's in his 50s, so he's a little older, and he's had a company before in agricultural amendments and organic soil amendments. And he actually invented a new technology called Aeroponics, a version of Aeroponics, and I can get into that in a little bit.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, that's vertical farming.
Okay.
I will talk a little bit about that, which really lit my fire. I thought it was really cool. I had no idea what aeroponics were. I mean, does anyone know what aeroponics is? No one. Oh, a couple people?
I have no idea what aeroponics is, honestly.
Yeah, see, I had the phone conversation with them, and I was like, aero, so air, and then ponics, water, so growing food with air and water. But I didn't really connect the dots until I visited him, and he showed me his new technology. It was a spray system that utilized nutrient-rich water, and it used air to create a Venturi effect that ripped apart the water molecules, atomized them, and sprayed them onto the roots without soil. And so that moment was a pretty exciting moment where I was like, okay, let's do this. And so he contacted me because I had an architectural design background, and he wanted to install systems into homes and restaurants and businesses. So that's kind of how I got started, and we ran with it, and we pivoted so many different times. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term, pivoting, when it comes to startup
Any
companies.
entrepreneurship students or majors here? A few?
Yes.
Know the term pivoting?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that for those who may not know what it is?
Yeah, so you go into business and you think you're going to sell something and sell it well, and it ends up, I wouldn't say crashing and burning when you do it, but it doesn't go as well as you think, and you realize, okay, well, if I'm going to make money for a living and keep my business and do something that I'm passionate about, I need to figure out a different road, a different way to create something that can still have an impact, but still be in the same realm of what my business stands for. So we've pivoted many times, and we've written many white papers and created many PowerPoints on different ideas. And I highly encourage people to do that before they start the business, because once you start the business, then you're moving, you're going, and it's like a train that you might have to stop it because you realize the market isn't there. And so if you can really test things out first for a while, and get a lot of people's opinions, criticism is the best for
Yeah, I agree with you. It's
figuring out what
that
you
constructive criticism,
Yeah.
and being able to accept those failures and learning from them is really key.
Yeah, exactly. That was probably failures is probably the best thing for a startup company. I mean, it's the worst and best thing, so it's kind of like chicken
I know,
and egg.
because we don't want to fail, right?
You don't want to
But,
fail. Yeah.
I mean, from those failures we learn, and it's a good thing.
Right, and then you see another way forward after you kind of put that to the side and you realize that's not the way it's going to work, and so you put your efforts towards something that can possibly work in your future, and you're trying to be as pragmatic as possible, and you just want to listen to everyone. You still want to hold your own and express yourself and build something, but it's really about finding mentors, finding people that are willing to criticize you, and then also having some tough skin. I mean, we're all kind of sensitive, right? We all have egos, but be willing to accept feedback from as many people as possible, and just reach out and find others that are really making headway in the industry or wherever you are. Like in golf, I'll do an analogy. The only way to get better is to play with better people than you. So that's kind of the mindset that you want to have when you're pursuing business. You want to.
Yeah, you want to be the dumbest person in the room, I think, right?
That is a more eloquent way of saying it.
I don't know who said that, but I know I've seen it somewhere.
Yeah.
That's not me. It's quoted from somewhere.
I think it was Winston Churchill.
What is it? Yeah, that's one of my favorite writers. Well, I have a few quotes from him, but we won't get into that. So let's get into more questions. So what is exactly that you dedicate most of your efforts to? I mean, I know you've talked a lot about sustainability, but what is it those efforts that you really say, like, this is really my dedication, this is really what I'm more dedicated to doing?
I would say, so it's been about 4 or 5 years I've been really on this journey of doing a startup and trying the best I can to focus on sustainability in different ways. Because I consider myself a sustainability consultant, but that doesn't mean everyone's gonna pay me for everything that I know. So right now, I just got done prepping a landscape for a new garden today, and that tends to be more of what I do right now. Custom gardens, I think you mentioned. And that was a pivot that happened a few years ago. So about 5 years ago, started in vertical farming, and we built so many different prototypes of aeroponics, hydroponics, aquaponics, and really started researching that stuff. And then it got into also just urban agriculture in general. And so that includes regenerative agriculture and raised beds and permaculture. Has anyone ever heard the term permaculture?
Yeah, when I heard you say permaculture, I was interested in learning more. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, permaculture it's not necessarily a technique. It's more of a mindset and techniques together. It's creating an ecosystem where you're living that can benefit you yourself by growing food and creating systems for taking your waste and repurposing things. And so we all eat, but we all have scraps from that food waste. Mm-hmm. So composting them, that's a part of permaculture. And there are certain different techniques for composting. So you have vermiculture, where you're using worms to break down the compost, and then you extract the worm castings to feed your plants. And then you also have different growing methods called Ugel farming, Ugel culture. It's a German type of farming where you actually put wood pieces, rotting wood and food scraps and leaves inside the soil, and the roots love it because the wood actually retains the moisture more than just soil. It retains it for a longer period, so you don't have to water as much.
So now that you mentioned that rotting wood, I do work a little bit with coconut husk, and it does tend to, rot. So how can that be useful in, maybe within my garden or, with growing my food?
Yeah, so nature has been doing R&D for millions of years, and it's been pretty efficient. It's gotten to a level where things are working well. There's a cycle to things, and the decomposition is probably the most important thing in life, one of the most important things, because when the insects break down all these materials, say in the forest or in your garden, and they're creating new life. They're creating the nutrients for the next plant or for the plants that exist there. So waste is probably the most important thing in the world. And figuring out how to utilize that waste as efficient as possible and effective as possible, that's a big part of permaculture. Mm-hmm. And so there's different methods, but that's something that I try to relay to a lot of my clients and build things for them so they can utilize their food scraps for a better garden and grow food utilizing waste. So.
Okay, so there seems to be a bit of a hypocrisy in the sustainable movement. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, that's a big jump. So sustainability has been used every day by thousands of people, and it can mean totally different things. And there's issues with greenwashing. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that term. Has anyone ever heard that term? No. Yeah. So there are certain companies or people that they say they're eco-friendly or really portray that, and it's a lot of talk, but they don't walk the walk. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't say that's necessarily hypocrisy, but when you have a little bit of introspection about what you're doing, you realize that we're all hypocrites. I drive a Tahoe because for my work I need to pull trailers and I have a lot of equipment, and that's a gas guzzler. It's not good for the environment, and I'm doing all the sustainability stuff. So when I'm talking to people about this stuff, I gotta address my own sustainability issues.
Yeah, and I could relate to that because it's still kind of hard for me to, like, when I go to a restaurant and order my drink, it's like, hold the straw, but I'm like, I really like drinking out of the straw because I don't want to drink the ice. But yeah, I relate.
And don't feel bad about, you know, a moment like that. But just keep it in your mind that you could next time maybe not do it. And don't get hard on yourself, but just recognize what you're doing. And if there are other ways of doing it better and more efficient and better for the environment, go for it. And if you try to go for it, then you're less of a hypocrite. So we're all a hypocrite in some sort of fashion, but if we are able to recognize it and reduce it as much as we can, then that's the way moving forward.
Oh, my daughter makes sure of it. She's like, really, you're killing the turtles. Like, don't drink with the straw. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, on that turtle thing, another thing, I work with a nonprofit called the International Green Industry Hall of Fame. And so we recognize companies and people that are going above and beyond and recognizing the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit. And so we celebrate these pioneers. And on her Facebook page, we had a message from a young lady. She was 11 years old, and she was saying how she wanted to save the turtles and reduce plastic straws. And this was like 3 years ago.
Is she part of that Tis Girls Club or something like that?
I think she was the first one to really push the movement.
Yeah, because my daughter, she's like, Mom, I'm like a Tis girl now. Like, she does not use the straws anymore, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so it was like, we're like, oh wow, she wants to do something, and so that's really important, is to support someone like that. They're reaching out to you, and they're opening up, and they want to do something impactful, and so we posted it on our page and gave her a little bit of a shout out, and now it's like a huge thing, and it might be a little overboard, but at least that happens within social media. Things just catch fire and they start moving, and it was all due to one or a few people that felt really passionate about it. And I think that's really what it comes down to.
And sometimes that's all it takes, that one person to take on that lead and make that movement, like you're doing, with the sustainability movement. And it's really awesome to have people like yourself, contributing to our community in that.
I do appreciate that. There are a lot of people, because I'm in this space and I want to be in it, I'm putting energy out there, I'm attracting certain people that want to do the same thing. And like yourself, and you guys invited me here, and it's way more than I thought, and it just keeps adding up, and so I don't feel like it's just me, which is really cool. And so I'm willing to support others and leverage each other's resources and ideas and knowledge and collaborate and work together, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's definitely. So let me see. So tell us a little bit about resource empowerment and what that implies.
So if we go back to permaculture, that's really all about resources. What do you need to live? So you need energy. You need to find out how you can transform your waste into something useful. You need water. You need food. So those are really important things for us all to live and be happy and healthy. And so if we focus on those things in our community and really dig into those, pun intended, and create an infrastructure within our community that's emphasizing those things and trying to provide people with as much resources as possible, but also provide them with the education and the training and the foresight to make those things happen in their neighborhoods, close by. Because right now we have infrastructure that has been built over 100 years that is all about distribution and transportation and big companies, and they're like, we'll do everything for you, don't worry about it, go to the grocery store, buy things, here, just put your garbage cans out there. Everything's kind of industrialized, and they're trying to make it easy for you, but it's actually taken us into a direction where now we're depending on the infrastructure that isn't efficient. And it's not helping us as a collective. It only benefits a few. So if we can empower each other with providing a better infrastructure to produce these resources and to turn these resources, renew these resources as best as possible,
So did you recently learn about something going on with the World Economic Forum and one of their leaders in Africa about that? I think it has to do with resource empowerment, because what they were talking about, and I was talking with a young lady earlier today, I guess they're converting their waste into energy by burning it, and that energy is fueling the whole city with power. And it was really interesting, and he also talked about, some sort of fly that's popular out there in Africa that's used to, I guess by doing that, they're able to produce this type of fly, and that fly is then used for pig feed and chicken feed, I believe. So yeah, so it was really, really interesting now that you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of cool stuff going on around the world, and a lot of it is actually low tech. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that term. You have all this high-tech stuff that uses programming and computers and all this, but there's some simple processes of, using flies to feed, or they break down compost, but then you also use flies to create the maggots in that compost, and then you extract that and feed the pigs. It's the entrepreneurs or leaders like that person that found that technique and implemented it, and it worked, and then they realized, okay, let's do this on a large scale and have it become something that can improve the community by bringing in more resources and also providing sustenance to another thing that can bring in resources. So it's just finding different little things that you can stack together to create resources and to replenish and to renew. And so stacking function is really important when it comes to sustainability.
So now that you're talking more about like technology, so what technology in this industry needs to be made to make it easier for all to grow their own food? I know you talked about, what your cousin's doing. You said it was your cousin, right?
Yes, business partner and
business,
cousin.
Okay, business partner.
His name's Joel Hedgepeth, and he created an awesome technology. And there's many technologies in the industry, and actually I do presentations at schools, and I work with multiple high schools. He mentioned I worked with Fresno Unified in the CTE program, and so...
That's awesome. We have a high school out here, Patino Entrepreneurship School. Raise your hands out there.
I've been to Patino. It's an awesome school, and you guys always present really cool ideas, so I'm all for that. I presented at Patino. I don't know if anyone was in that class when I presented, but I presented on vertical farming and all the different types of techniques.
Wow.
So there's some broad categories. There's aquaponics.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone know what aquaponics is? No? Okay. So this is probably the most sustainable way of producing food. You're utilizing fish poop and pee in the water. You pump that into a raised bed with plants in it. Those plants will then eat the pathogens and the ammonia and all the nitrogen that's in that poop, and it feeds those plants. They grow. Those plants now absorb that. Now that water is clear. Now it's filtered. That water now goes back into the fish tank. So the plants are actually cleaning the fish tank, and the fish are providing the food for the plants. So it's called a closed ecological system. It's a symbiotic relationship between the fish and the plants.
Oh wow! So it just keeps, circling.
Yeah, and there's people that will feed the fish with fish food they get from the store, but there's other people that truly close the loop by growing grasshoppers and having the grasshoppers drop into the water for the fish to eat. Also, there are people that will put cages above the water and have chickens in those cages. They'll go and they'll poop into the water, and the fish eat the chicken poop.
Oh wow!
And then you feed the chicken the veggies. And then, so...
And then we eat the chicken.
And you eat the chicken or eat the fish. And so you can set up an aquaponics system and make some really good fish tacos.
Oh, wow. With some nopales.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's see. How important is it for farmers, cultivators, food growers to upgrade current technology?
It's really important, and it's a natural evolution of things. I think every company is striving to be better, but there are farmers that are traditional, and I wouldn't say they're stuck in their ways, but it's working for them. But we do have a climate and earth that changes, not just because of climate change, but just different situations. It could be a financial situation. It could be something that happens in your local community, or the market goes away, and they have to evolve. And
even like when we've dealt with the freezing that's taken place here, that's affected a lot of our crops.
Yeah. So farmers are some of the hardest workers. I mean, they're growing food for the world, and they're risking all of their assets on that harvest. So they go a long time without making money. They're putting all into it, and they're trying their best not to fail. So they're willing to listen and work with others. If a neighbor farm is doing something that works, the neighbor is going to tell them. And I find that to be more now than before. It feels like more people are collaborating and sharing. Because we want each other to succeed, because that improves our community, creating a better economy. There's always going to be competition, but I feel like people are coming together a little bit more to support each other.
Yeah.
And so these companies are looking for better technologies and better employees that are trained in the new direction of farming. So there's a lot of programming going into farming now with drones. Drones will go overhead of the farms and detect certain diseases in plants that can't be seen by the naked eye. And so that will save a farmer thousands of dollars, $1 million.
Yeah.
And so if we can create robotics or drones like that can detect these things before they spread, then that saves that farmer's livelihood, but also the economy. And so with the CTE program with Fresno Unified, we're trying to introduce students to these technologies and help them get some shadowing, get some internships where they can learn about these different software issues or hardware issues, so they can be the next generation that comes up and solves world hunger.
Yeah, because they are the future, so they should start learning now. So drip irrigation is big right now. What are your thoughts on that and on hydroponics?
So drip irrigation was actually introduced to the valley around the 70s and 80s, probably the early 80s, and they started using on vineyards. And instead of flood, which used a lot of water, drip came in and used way less water, so saved a lot of money, and it was direct to the root zone. So drip is all about getting water directly to the root zone and not wasting water. And with agriculture around us, it's just in the fields. It's mostly vineyards and almonds now. And there's sprayers, there's drip lines, there's a whole bunch of different types of variations. And then when it comes to hydroponics, you're not using soil. You're using, say, like hydrotin or like clay pebbles or lava rock. It's not necessarily soil, it's a medium. That's what they call it. So it's an aggregate or a medium or a substrate. Those are the ways of describing what that is. And what it does is it holds the plant together, it holds the stalk, but it also retains moisture, and it makes it easier for water to come in and feed the root zone, but also protect the root zone. And so hydroponics, you have about 10 different types of variations. I could get into them, but like nutrient film technique or deep water culture or flood and drain, ebb and flow, there's a lot of different types.
So which is a particular type that you're more passionate about or?
Passionate about? I would say my favorite is probably ebb and flow. I think it's the most efficient because you're introducing the water, you're flooding it into the plant zone, you're feeding it, and then it goes back into the to the reservoir. And when you're doing that, you're allowing oxygen to come in to be in the root zone. And roots actually really like oxygen. And so if you do that, if you keep fluctuating that water, it keeps everything agitated, so you don't have...
So you're not like overwatering.
You're not overwatering, and you also put it on a timer, and also you don't have as much algae growth, and the plants just like it better. They like a little bit of a break from water, and then they like the oxygen, and so I see that as being the most efficient. But aeroponics is probably the fastest growing and uses less water. It uses about 98% less water than just traditional growing in soil. And it grows, you don't need soil, it's more lightweight, there's more applications that you can do with that. So yeah, we can get really deep into all that stuff, but we can talk about it.
Okay, so we're gonna actually open it up now for Q&A for our guests. Just one last thing though, if they want to learn more about where they can go to, maybe learn about you and your company, and even probably grow their own garden, where could they find information on that?
We're on Instagram, Life Flower Tech. You can check that out and some of the work we've done. You can go to our website, lifeflowertech.com, and you can message me and let me know what you're trying to do. I work with a lot of people in the community to build gardens that benefit other people. So a lot of community garden work. We did a really cool project in Chachansey Ballpark where we have